Hey everyone, Duke Nougat 3D here, back again with another review, and today we have another video on the MSA Burrell Kops-Type, but it is a particular variant of the MSA Burrell Kops-Type that is referenced very little and discussed even less. So I'm sure most of you are all well aware if you've seen my previous Burrell Kops-Type videos, which I'll link down in the description below if you want to get caught up on those. One of the longest standing myths in the gas mask community is that the MSA Burrell Kops-Types were made from recycled World War I era Kops, Tissot, and Monroe masks, and that is certainly not the case due to the several differences in manufacturing and materials used on the MSA examples as opposed to the some 2,000 of the original World War I examples that existed at the time, but nevertheless, MSA Burrell Kops-Types are not military masks in origin. There are several key differences which have been pointed out numerous times. However, there is a variant of the Kops-Type which is, again, referenced very little and has little to no documentation, and one of the most constant reoccurring misconceptions about this mask is that it is often misidentified as an Army M1 service mask due to the 27-inch M2 hose and the M3 style carrier seen in photographs. However, this is not the case. Much like with the myth of the Kops-Type being a KTM, the 27-inch Burrell Kops-Type variant is often misidentified as an Army M1 service mask, even more so due to the fact that Johannes Muller had decided to mock up an M1 service mask using an M2 hose and M4 canister from an M1A1 service mask with the facepiece of a Burrell Kops-Type, leading to further adding to that confusion of which facepiece is military and which is industrial. And again, I will link my previous Kops-Type videos in the description to get more details on what is different, but nevertheless, for a brief period, it seems a lot of industrial companies were attempting the 27-inch hose configuration due to the success and popularity of it with the military at the time, and they figured having the canister out of the way at the side instead of on the chest as per usual would prolong the life of the canister and make the setup overall less cumbersome and more comfortable to carry. This particular setup, which as far as I know does not have an official designation, there is a Federal Labs catalog that Moulage owns, which refers to this setup as the Model A Infantry mask. However, that may or may not be the actual designation for this kit, and I should go on a limb and say that this is not an original kit. This is entirely mocked up with hardware components, but it is basically representative exactly of what the original kit would have been like, going off of original period photographs, but I'll get more into the kit details in a moment. So we don't know an official designation on this particular kit. The only reference to a name is the Model A Infantry mask, and aside from that we have a handful of photos which fail to reference the mask itself and have been historically misidentified as an Army M1 service mask as stated before. I don't know exactly how long this particular kit lasted, as the sort of Kops-Type configuration with a canister in a M1 chest carrier or a side carrier did not seem to last very long, and most police agencies were moving on to other style of masks with the canister on the chin, as those seem to be more popular. However, the configuration seemed to have lasted a decent while from possibly the very late 1920s, and very possible, I'm not entirely sure how early this kit was introduced, considering that the Kops-Type had several different facepiece variations throughout its production run of the 20s into the 1930s. However, this kit seemed to have existed somewhere between the very end of the 1920s and the mid to late 1930s. That being said, again, we have no information on what specific police agencies used it. There is a photograph of the Detroit police using this setup, but again, no further references on who all has purchased or utilized this particular kit and throughout what eras. And other than that, it seems to be a very short-lasting and unpopular kit. So getting into the details of the kit, and which again I will state this is entirely a mock-up, this is not original, but it is close, almost identical, nearly identical for one key detail to an original, which I will get to in a moment. So obviously the facepiece is just a standard MSA Burrell Kops-Type, identified by its stockinette covered black sheet rubber facepiece, which is sewn at the chin with a seam. It has pressed chrome-plated brass eyepieces with glass safety lenses, which are unfortunately very deteriorated on my example, but nevertheless they are intact. A 6-point head harness, which is missing on my example due to deterioration, and I will reproduce a new head harness in the future. I am actually expecting a sewing machine fairly recently, so I should hopefully be able to get onto that. A KTM style angle tube assembly with the hose stem and a M2 style flutter valve, and with a guard, which is either usually just a simple piece of pressed steel as opposed to the military ones, which are two separate pieces of intricately folded and pressed steel with a cross guard across the back. However, I have seen examples of Kops types that use the military style flutter valve guards with the cross strap across the back, but most of the Kops types typically use this simple stamped steel flutter guard, and some of them even use recycled flutter guards off of World War I CEMs that have been cut down to size. But getting ahead of myself, you can see the Kops stamp on the left side of the facepiece. Serial number is obstructed here. I think I see a 46 right here, but it is undecipherable, and then below that is the patent date. And really nothing else to see externally. You have a Bureau of Mines approval stamp on the right side of the cheek. However, it is, again, very faded and obscured. Looking inside the facepiece, which has been propped open with a popsicle stick for getting rid of this dilapidation here, which seems to be persistent due to this facepiece having been crammed in an M1 chest carrier for upwards of 100 years. But nevertheless, you can see the interior with the Akron Tissot style deflector tubes and the fabric patches which reinforce all the stitching inside the facepiece, and really nothing special to see there. You've basically no different than a typical Kops type, but in case you wanted to see more of it in detail, I show it off again. So, moving on, obviously the main and defining feature of this kit is the hose, which is a 27-inch stockinette covered M2 style hose, as stated before, which Moulage was kind enough to send this example to me, as he has one off of a M1A2 service mask, which he has disassembled in the past, I assume. I believe this is the hose that came off of that example. On the end of the hose, and again, I can confirm this is the canister that this setup would have used from period photographs and references. This is the MSA Type G canister for military gases, and I know in the past me and Moulage have stated this is for tear gas only, but looking into the details, due to it having activated carbon inside, activated charcoal and other filtering ingredients, I could probably say that this is actually meant for more than just tear gas. Like, this can actually protect against a wide variety of chemical warfare agents that would have been in use at the time of this production. So this is more than just a tear gas filter, I'm going to state for the record. And as you can see, this one has been relabeled by the Lake Erie Chemical Company, which most of these have often been relabeled, and you can see where the label is chipped. There is another label underneath which would undoubtedly have the MSA stamps and the Type G designation. However, most of these have been rebranded through LECO just due to the fact that they have closer ties with law enforcement than MSA, and so it was easier for them to resell it to law enforcement while also supplying them with tear gas equipment. Moving on from the kit, which there isn't too much to see about the facepiece and all that, it's just really just a Bureau Kops type with a longer hose. The carrier, obviously, this is not the original carrier, because this is a M3 carrier off of my M1A1 Army service mask. However, from period photographs, I can defer that this particular Kops type setup used an M3 style carrier. However, it would not be US stamped and would not have the chemical warfare insignia on the front of it. It would have absolutely no markings whatsoever on the exterior, and I doubt that it had any markings in general anywhere else. And the main way to tell these Kops type M3 style carriers is that it has 3 lifted dots instead of just these 2 right here. So it has a center lift the dot right there. I'm not particularly sure why they did it this way, but nevertheless, that is a feature that tells them apart from the regular M3 carriers like you see here. And I'm willing to believe that they actually made these carriers a little bit larger as well, due to the fact that I have actually tried to fit the Type G canister inside of this carrier, and due to the fact that the hose does not have an elbow or the canister does not have an elbow to redirect the hose off at a right angle, the hose sticks up prominently and impinges upon the top of the carrier. So a normal M3 carrier will not fit this setup, but I would assume that the MSA produced carriers, which are rare as hen's teeth, I've never actually seen a physical example of one, let alone an example of this kit in general. I would be more than willing to believe they made the carriers larger to accommodate this particularly odd type of canister. So really, that's all the info I have on this. I'll try and maybe link some original photographs in the description. However, if I can't do that, I'll just link them to you directly via an Imgur link if you want. But nevertheless, that's basically all there is to it. There isn't much to see. Just wanted to describe and discuss a very odd and mysterious missing link in the MSA timeline. So that being said, I'm Duke Nugget 3D. If you have any comments, questions, corrections, or concerns, drop them down in the comments below, and I'll see you all later.